Since the outbreak of the Gaza war, no Western journalists have been allowed inside the Strip. Until now. This week, CNN was able to visit a field hospital in Gaza. It was run by the United Arab Emirates. So I think it's probably via the UAE that they managed to get in. It wasn't completely clear in the clip. What they found was shocking.
Up until now, Israel and Egypt have made access for international journalists next to impossible. And you can see why.
Since October 7th, the Israeli military says it has hit Gaza with more than 22,000 strikes. That by far surpasses anything we've seen in modern warfare in terms of intensity and ferocity. And we really, honestly, are just getting a glimpse of it here.
Despite Israel's heavy bombardment, there are people out on the streets. A crowd outside a bakery. Where else can they go? Nowhere is safe in Gaza.
Used to be a stadium.
Arriving at the Emirati Field Hospital, we meet Dr. Abdullah Al-Nakbi. No sooner does our tour begin when
Our ambulance. That's a real life.
And this is what you hear all the time now?
Yes. At least 20 times a day.
So as I've said, Western journalists haven't been allowed inside Gaza ever since the war began. So since October the 7th, over 2 months. And the first time one Western journalist is able to go into Gaza, the moment they enter a hospital, they hear an airstrike in the distance, right? That just shows you how regular, how normal this is in Gaza right now. As I say, they travel with medical volunteers. You know, I guess that Israel still doesn't really want CNN to be seeing this kind of thing. It might have been an agreement with the UAE, who run the field hospital that she was visiting. Clarissa Ward is the journalist. In the clip next, she speaks to a young girl who had her leg sort of crushed when Israel bombed her home. And then new casualties start to arrive. They are from that same bomb that we heard when the CNN journalist first entered the hospital.
a man and a 13-year-old boy are wheeled in, both missing limbs, both in a perilous state. What's your name? What's your name? The doctor asks. The notes provided by the paramedics are smeared with blood. The tourniquet improvised with a bandage. Since the field hospital opened less than 2 weeks ago, it has been inundated with patients. 130 of their 150 beds are already full.
So let me understand this. You are now basically the only hospital around that still has some beds?
I guess so, yes. Or maybe I'm very sure of that, because they are telling me one of the hospital with a capacity of 200, they are accommodating 1,000 right now. And the next door hospital, I'm not very sure, he said like 50 to 100, has maybe 400 to 500 patients. So at one occasion he called me, he said, I have 3 patients in each bed, please take any. I told him, send as many as you can.
I mean, we've been here 15 minutes, and this is already what we're seeing.
This is, you heard it, you see it.
I think it's important. Again, they've only been there 15 minutes, right? The first time a Western journalist has been allowed into Gaza, within 15 minutes, they hear an airstrike and then they see people being taken into a field hospital, probably with limbs that need to be amputated, right? So also you heard the doctor say there, I mean, as far as I understand from that clip, you know, there'll be lots of people in hospitals which existed before the war, you know, so permanent hospitals. He's saying free to a bed there. So the UAE have come in and set up this field hospital, so sort of a temporary hospital for a war zone. And that's the only hospital in that part of Gaza that has any space whatsoever. Let's go to the next part of that report.
In every bed, another gut punch. Less than 2 years old, Amir still doesn't know that his parents and siblings were killed in the strike that disfigured him. Yesterday, he saw a nurse that looked like his father. His aunt Nahaya tells us he kept screaming, "Dad, Dad, Dad." Amir is still too young to comprehend the horror all around him. But 20-year-old Lama understands it all too well. 10 weeks ago, she was studying engineering at university and helping to plan her sister's wedding. Today, she is recovering from the amputation of her right leg. Her family followed Israeli military orders and fled from the north to the south. But the house where they were seeking shelter was hit in a strike. The world isn't listening to us, she says. Nobody cares about us. We have been dying for over 60 days, dying from the bombing, and nobody did anything.
You saw that a baby or a toddler, very, very young child with no family, right? Too young yet to understand the significance of what has just happened to them. And then you've got a young woman, with a whole career ahead of her, lost a leg. And you think the consequences of this war, the human tragedy right now is immense, but the consequences of this are going to last for generations. Now, people who are permanently, significantly, life-alteringly disabled for the rest of their lives, and people who are going to grow up with no family. Right? And this is all a war which the West is backing to the hilt. The idea that you can do this and then seek peace, I mean, what are they thinking? This amount of human damage makes sense if what you're trying to do is ethnically cleanse a place, make it impossible to live. It's difficult how to see that this would be logical if what you want to do is what the West say they're doing, which is taking out a terrorist organization and liberating a people so that they can have a new moderate government. Right? If you've disabled a huge proportion of a population, if many of the people left have had their entire families wiped out, will have to spend their whole childhoods, without their parents and siblings. I mean, presumably that person might grow up with their auntie. I don't know. There's going to be, so many people with these incredibly tough, distressing decisions to make. And that's all because they've been dropping 22,000 bombs or so in one of the most densely populated parts of the world. I mean, it's not a surprise that this is happening. It's just so shocking to see it. The summary from the CNN journalist, as I say, I think this was a good report. CNN, we've had our critiques of throughout this war. We will continue to have them. But this report was very powerful. And so was the summary the CNN journalist sort of delivered. Let's take a look at that last part of this film.
Words of condemnation delivered in a thin rasp. But does anyone hear them? Like Grozny, Aleppo, and Mariupol, Gaza will go down as one of the great horrors of modern warfare. It's getting dark. Time for us to leave. A privilege the vast majority of Gazans do not have. Our brief glimpse from a window onto hell is ending as a new chapter in this ugly conflict unfolds.
The part there of her statement that I found quite remarkable was this, saying, like Grozny, Aleppo, and Mariupol, Gaza will go down as one of the great horrors of modern warfare. And why I found that, quite exceptional, almost surprising, Aaron, is because by using those examples, Grozny, Aleppo, Mariupol, you are associating Israel with Vladimir Putin and Bashar al-Assad. And while I think that's a perfectly legitimate comparison here, somewhat unusual to see that in corporate mainstream media, because in corporate mainstream media, they're normally trying to hold up the facade that the kind of, those guys are a different breed, Russian foreign, we might have problems with Israeli foreign policy, but it's completely different to Assad. It's completely different to Putin. What they're doing is, for good reasons, they're probably trying to limit livelihoods. They're part of our team, the civilized team. And so to hear Israel's government compared to the governments of American enemies seemed somewhat new to me.
Well, I think it's worse than Mariupol and Grozny, Michael, because they can't go anywhere. As disgusting as those events were, and they were war crimes, and there was an illegal war in Ukraine by Russia, people could leave Mariupol and go to, Lviv or other parts of Ukraine which were safer. They can't do that in Gaza. They're just ducks in a barrel waiting to be shot at. We've seen, according to UNICEF, 5,000 children have died. UNICEF, okay? The Palestinian Health Ministry, and of course that then has the criticism of, that's Hamas-backed or whatever, Gaza rather, backed health ministry. I think it's about 19,000 people have died overall. But UNICEF are now saying 5,000 children. And like you say, Michael, we talked earlier on about a two-state solution. That needs to happen. Obviously, a ceasefire needs to happen. People who are supportive of Israel say, well, there can't be a ceasefire until Hamas are eradicated. How is this eradicating Hamas? You tell me how not just killing 5,000 children, but like you say, Michael, destroying the lives of multitudes more. How's that eradicating Hamas? Anybody watching this, regardless of your politics, right, left, center, you can be, Benjamin Netanyahu. If somebody does this to your child, what do you do? What would you do? I know what I would do. I know what I would do. I would go to the grave swearing revenge. Of course I would. Any sane, reasonable person would. Of course they would. Anybody in the world would do that. And so if trying to destroy Hamas means you kill 5,000 children, you kill 20,000 people almost so far, there's no end in sight. Even if you get rid of Hamas, which they won't, you're obviously creating Hamas too. It's so reminiscent of conversations in regards to Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and then ISIS. You cannot address political grievances purely through violence. You can't. There has to be a political solution. There has to be. And, our media likes to basically live in an alternative reality half the time where they just say, well, no, that's not true. That's not the case. I would simply destroy my enemies. Well, it doesn't work like that. Because when you, quote unquote, destroy your enemies and you disfigure and maim thousands of children, you make many times more enemies. Okay, it's not as simple as that. I don't understand how any of this in the long term makes Israel more safe. I think every child that dies, every child that's maimed, makes Israel less safe. Every tower block that is brought crashing down in Gaza is a recruiting sergeant for people that would like to eradicate the state of Israel. It is pure, unadulterated insanity. And I'd also add, Michael, it's unadulterated evil. It's evil. While this is happening, I've seen them. I've been on them. There are Telegram groups in Hebrew with 100,000 plus people laughing at these scenes. I've seen those groups. I've been on them, laughing. And this is a regime that we're backing. There was a vote in the General Assembly in regards to whether or not there should be a ceasefire. 150 plus nations voted for a ceasefire. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was 20 against, 10 abstained, something like that. The United States voted against. They were joined by geopolitical giants such as Liberia, Nicaragua. You had countries like Britain abstained. Shameful, by the way. Shameful. We deserve absolutely no credibility on the global stage. Zero. We were joined by people like Tonga and Togo. The only other major countries that sort of either abstained or voted against the ceasefire were basically Germany and Austria because of let's be frank, their historical guilt. Let's not even talk about what's going on in Germany right now, the complete loss of any sanity or reason on this debate. You even saw Australia supporting a ceasefire. Australia, Canada, these are countries historically which are very tight. We're talking about the Five Eyes, right? This alliance of the UK, the US, New Zealand, Canada, Australia. When three of the Five Eyes are voting in a very different way to the US and the UK, something quite extraordinary has happened. Australia didn't just support the Iraq war, Michael. The John Howard government sent soldiers to Iraq. And now the Australian government is completely at odds with what the US is doing and even disagreeing with the UK. This is unadulterated evil. And when people say, oh, well, why are people canvassing Keir Starmer or asking for a vote in government, in Parliament at the House of Commons, calling for a ceasefire, what difference will it make? Well, even if it makes 0.01% difference, and by the way, it's a hell of a lot more than that, they should still be doing it. Because people look at those scenes of children losing their arms and legs and sight at the age of 2, 3, 4, and 5 and say, what can I do? What can I do to stop evil? A very normal, healthy response. And we here in the UK can do something, which is lobby politicians to back a ceasefire. We're fortunate in so much as we're members of a national community. We're citizens in a country which has a UN Security Council seat, which is seen as having decent geopolitical weight. We're a nuclear power. We're a relatively influential country on the world stage. Not China or the US, but relatively. And so, of course, it's perfectly reasonable to demand our politicians do something about this and not, like Labour, talk out both sides of their mouth. On the one hand, say that we want, a humanitarian pause, but oppose an actual proper ceasefire. So there's just so much to talk about with this, Michael. And I actually think, you look at the data, 76% of people in this country support a ceasefire of some kind. There are so many people I've spoken to who aren't on the left. Normal people, normies. They'll watch GB News, right? They'll vote the Conservatives. They voted for Brexit. And you talk to them and they say what's happening there is just appalling. Because they see children being killed, Michael. They see children being killed, having bombs dropped on them. And those people have infinitely more common sense than our political class, because both the Tories and the Labour Party seem to think this is fine. Our ambassador, Michael, I've seen few things, I have to say, in recent history more shameful than our ambassador to the UN abstaining on this, abstaining. At least have the courage of your convictions to support Israel, abstaining, while 5,000 children die. Remarkable. So of course people are angry. And if you want to go and hector a politician, you should feel free to. Don't break the law, of course. Don't be overly intimidating. But if you want to tell a politician firmly, as a gentleman did on a train recently to Keir Starmer, why are you tacitly endorsing this? Because you're not saying there should be a ceasefire. Why are you tacitly endorsing the mass murder of children? Tell me. Give me a reason why. Give me an explanation why. Well, it makes Israel more safe. Well, clearly it doesn't. How? How is it making Israel more safe? These are serious questions that need to be asked of our political class. And then finally, people will say, well, look, Aaron, I agree with all that, but it's a long way away. Okay? Bad to see, horrible, it's evil even. But what can Keir Starmer do? What can Rishi Sunak do? What can any politician do? Your local MP? What can they do? Well, I just think it's such a get out, because also, Michael, if you've got a politician, a publicly elected figure, and they care that little about a child being murdered in their bed, or they care that little about a child losing its entire family and being disfigured in its face and losing arms and legs, if they care that little, then I really am concerned about how much they care about you and me. Okay? If they have that little humanity, I'd be incredibly worried about, actually, when push comes to shove, how do they feel about the people they're meant to represent? So it's very important. And I think it's a significant barometer of basic humanity right now. Do you support a ceasefire or not?